Hello, everyone. We have a very exciting and important guest today. He is Dr. Alexander Kwapong, Vice-Rector of the United Nations University in Tokyo since its inception in 1976. Dr. Kwapong is from Ghana, Africa. He majored classics in the university in Ghana and also in Cambridge University, and he became professor of the University of Ghana, a visiting professor in the Princeton University in the United States, and then the president of the University of Ghana before assuming the current position. So we would like to talk about the UNU a little bit today, and also about Africa and the problems of development. Dr. Kwapong, it is indeed an honor to have you in this program.
And it's also a great privilege for me to participate in this program.
By way of introducing you to the Japanese viewers, first I would like to ask you a few questions about your personal background. You went to college in Ghana, but I don't think so many people in your country will have the opportunity to advance to the university. Could you just briefly tell us about the situation?
Yes, at the time that I was at high school, there was no sort of full university institution. But we had this college, which we called Achimota, which had been, in fact, it celebrated its 50th anniversary just about 5 years ago. And Ghana, in fact, has enjoyed the advantages of quite a good system of general education, part of it established through private enterprise, some through the missionary efforts during the period before the colonial rule came into being, some through later developments. But it was really when the country, which was formerly known as Ghana, was sort of growing and developing, the period just before, during the First and Second World War, that these developments really occurred properly. And so by the time I went to school, from a mission school to Achimota, which was one of the big of the, I think about 6 or 7 secondary or high schools, colleges in the country, I think formal education was reasonably well advanced. There were several people who had been received university education, mostly abroad, but many had been up to both high school and so teacher training standards. But the question was how to increase this and build up higher education on a very major scale. So in fact, the University of Ghana, which later on I became the president, really sort of got going in 1948, just at the time as I was going to Cambridge for my university studies fully, although I had done the courses which in many places would be sort of first or second year university education in other places. So when I came back to the University of Ghana, it was then the University College of the Gold Coast in special relationship with London University to teach as a young lecturer. It had then about, probably about, say, 400 or 500 students. Now we have 3 universities in Ghana, the one of which I was president, University of Ghana.
That's in Accra, right?
And Accra, yes. Called actually at a place called Legon, just outside Accra. Then there is the University of Science and Technology at Kumasi, which is the second city in Ghana, in about 200 miles from Accra. And then there's a third university, University of Cape Coast. So in terms of university institutions, Ghana is one good example of the tremendous expansion in university education that's taking place in many parts of Africa.
I see. How about the cost aspect? You have to be in rather a privileged social position to go to the university, or if you are smart, you can go to university.
Yes, now in fact it's much easier if you are smart. You can get into universities. There are various awards, support by government and so on. In the days that I for instance, went to university in England, it wasn't very easy to get so many scholarships to support one. I was fortunate to have got a scholarship. And in fact, that development, which led to greater university expansion, began with more people being given support as the independence movement began to grow. So now there are about, say, by about 5,000 to 6,000 students at the University of Ghana, altogether about, say, 11,000 to 12,000 students in Ghana. So now, yes. So this, in fact, is illustrative of what has been happening in many parts of Africa, where before the war, there were about only 4 or 5 such university institutions. The Association of African Universities, of which the University of Ghana is one and those in Ghana one, is now made up of about 80 such institutions. So this illustrates some of the aspects of development on the continent.
Now, Dr. Kwapong, you have been in Japan now for 6 years, right? How do you like living in this country?
Oh, well, this is it's a very exciting country to come in. It's, of course, a very strange country. I'm sure you hear about that very well. If you acquire some of the rudiments, let us say, of Nihongo, if you are not quite Hena Gaijin, but nevertheless acquire what I call functional Nihongo, that is to say, the ability to communicate to the average person, the taxi drivers, the shops, and so on, and learn at least a few of the kanji, place names, and so on. So you are not completely illiterate. You acquire a little bit of this functional literacy, I call, then you can find that this is one of the most comfortable and most interesting cities. At first, it's so crowded, it looks so strange, and you come, they always write the address where you're going and give it to the taxi driver and all that. But if you manage to penetrate a little bit beneath this, then this is one of the most well-organized cities. As we all know about crime, the low rates of crime, the efficiency of the public utilities, and so the high cost of living, of course, one of the things you notice. But so long as you manage to, find a proper niche to fit in, I think this is one of the most exciting cities. But it would be very helpful, for instance, for the foreign people who are coming more and more here, if some of the developments which I've seen taking place over the last 6 years could be accelerated. For instance, the more place names and directions given in also, Rumeji, in the, for instance, so yes, there's been quite a lot of progress. It used to be in the subways, for instance, only the name of the station, where you came from, and where you're going, which is also given, in addition to the kanji and the katakana. But now you will find, in fact, on the sort of platform, there is a strip showing you, the line, and at least in this. So this is a progress. But I think it will be very much more helpful if some of the place names, some of the street signposting, some of the roads and so on could be helpful, because Tokyo is no longer an isolated capital. Tokyo is now a major metropolitan world center with lots of aircraft and communications, and you got to work along a little more on that in that area. But given that, and if you want prepared to learn a little Nihongo, and you are not afraid to walk around and so on, you encounter a great deal of courtesy and friendship. And also, of course, you get used to the curiosity of seeing a stranger, particularly an African, a black man, the children, the reactions, or so on. That's the normal things which you encounter whenever you leave home. Japanese coming to Africa also encounter the same type of reactions.
So you're enjoying?
Yeah, I'm enjoying myself immensely.
Could you tell us a little bit about the programs run by UN University?
Yes. I think it's first useful to say that the university is not the traditional university with the with a major campus the major disciplines and professors and students, you know.
You don't have any students?
So not here. We have some students, but not the traditional ones you used to. What we do have is, in fact, an effort by the United Nations following the, view advanced by UTANT in 1969. What we do have is a major effort to promote international intellectual cooperation, but for a practical end, to build up an international community of scholars, working through a network of institutions. Some of them actually, most of them actual existing institutions, some specially created for the purpose, and working together in networks and a number of programs which are designed to achieve three things. One is to do research in some of the critical pressing problems of the world of a global character. The second is to provide advanced training in these areas. And the third is to disseminate, knowledge. And so you have in Tokyo, because the Japanese government offered to be host to this thing, the headquarters here, which at the moment is in the Toho Seimei Biru, in the 22.5 floors, 29th, 28th, and half of 26th floor. And what we do have is a programming and coordinating headquarters. And one of the things which the average Japanese who has heard about the, Kokuren Daigaku based here would like to see is much more of the things, people coming and going, visiting scholars, and so on. This is beginning to build up. And now people are beginning to understand what the university is doing. But this is not only the UN University. Outside, in a worldwide basis, we're active in over 60 countries through these various programs and networks of institutions, of association and so on. And the main idea is that the traditional idea of a university, which is to promote learning, to enhance it and to transmit it. You now have also the dimension of the United Nations, where the basic problems of the world are brought together, and where, the problems of culture, the problems of politics, and so on, are together. And the idea of the university is to try and fuse the dual mandate of university and United Nations working together to provide an intellectual dimension to the concerns, the global concerns particularly, like problems of hunger, problems of energy, problems of development, and so on, which are working, which are really the stuff that really an interdependent world has to think of. Yes.
Now about...
And then let me finish, because I think you asked about the students. What we do have is in our charter to place a great emphasis, but not exclusively, upon the problems of the developing countries, where the poverty is, poverty, hunger, and so on, are so strongly evident. And to provide these, facilities for training, research, and so on, to a number of people who already have probably basic disciplinary competence, but that is, they have had some basic training, probably university, but need to be given this specialized training and capacity to look at problems in a broader way, and also to, elaborate the knowledge in a way that will promote the development and interaction and of the various communities around the world. So you have these institutions of cooperation, association, and so on, and they are working together in a network, and the headquarters is here. So we hope that we'll be able to promote more interaction between the center and the rest of the world. But also one of the major concerns is, of course, that we should have more interaction in all these areas with the community of scholars and the people of Japan, who are providing quite a lot to support us to do our work.
You just mentioned one of the objectives of UNU is to help raise the level of education and technology in the developing countries. Now, about Africa, where you're from, and the program of development, we sometimes feel that the gap between developing countries like those in Africa and the industrialized countries is expanding rather than narrowing. What are the major problems facing developing countries, for example, in Africa?
Well, you know, there's no doubt that this is probably the major question of the world today. We hear a lot about peace. You are very much concerned about nuclear reactions and so on. Of course, if we blow ourselves up, you know, that's the end of the exercise. So there's no question that world peace and genuine peaceful relations, coexistence between different peoples is a major problem which should exercise all of us. But the major sort of probably question mark in the world today is what you mentioned, which is the gap that is widening between the so-called developing countries on the one hand, or underdeveloped countries. The terminology has changed with fashion, but we all know what we mean. And the industrialized countries, those which have mastered the benefits of, science, technology, and modern developments to participate in, some of the things that we all would like to have. Now, the problem is how the imbalance dividing the world today, can be overcome. And this is, in fact, the basic subject of the debate that you hear in the United Nations. You don't often hear the other side of the picture, or some of the positive things that are actually going on. But the fact is that for instance, in the case of Africa, when you take a concrete example, you have all the problems which, are the result of the colonial legacy, the underdevelopment, which, through various factors, some of which you may mention, like the slave trade, the, colonial exploitation, and the actual instability that is created by some of these factors, and some of the endemic, problems of, environment, disease, geography, and so on. These are some of the basic things which ought to be getting more and more attention. But since some of these, all these problems, in fact, have a global dimension, your prosperity here, as you know, is very much founded upon also the prosperity of other nations.
That is true.
And so far, the connections, for instance, between Japan and Africa, which have been very peripheral, and which a continent which remains a sort of dark question mark, is based primarily on such trading needs of yours, where to sell your manufactured products, Toyota cars and Datsuns and, electronic goods, and also where to get the natural resources for your thing, so that in chromium, which is, Africa is about 100% producer of chromium. These are some of the things which your average oil, some of the things which your average businessmen are very much aware of, and some of the government too. And the average person does not know. What he sees, for instance, on your television set is always the animals, which is very fashionable from East Africa and Central Africa, the strange customs, people dancing in the night with grass skirts, jumping the Maasai and so on. This is the thing. You look at the advertisements, you look at the media, and then people starving, refugees, wars, coup d'etat. But what you don't have is, in fact, a much more direct interaction, which is understandable in some respects. For historical reasons, you have been very much concerned with, Southeast Asia, your immediate neighborhood, and your historical, geographical, and also, recent contemporary needs. But I think it is no longer adequate for Japan to have these sort of peripheral relations in an interdependent world where most of your needs are becoming more and more involved with other countries. And above all, I think what I see is very necessary is both a scientific and cultural, interaction on a much more sustained and in-depth basis. Because it is only when the large numbers of young students, professors, scientists, they're developing, in touch with each other in a much more sustained basis, that you can have a better understanding in the future. Because development, which you mentioned, is after all about people. And let me give you just one example. derived from my own personal experience, where the University of Ghana, of which I was then president, decided that it should expand the cooperation which developed between Fukushima Medical College and the University of Ghana's medical school.
That's about this Dr. Noguchi.
Yes. And so based upon the fact that Noguchi, Dr. Hideo Noguchi from Fukushima, had laid down his life through research in Ghana in 1927. And I'm sure every schoolboy here knows about Dr. Noguchi. He is also, I think, he's also a great hero in Ghana, for those who understand this thing. And so we wanted to have a symbol of cooperation on the intellectual and scientific basis, which was concrete. Well, the result of the negotiations, which in fact brought me here in 1975, when on my way here I was offered this appointment, which I'm now still occupying. It was agreed between the University of Ghana and the Japanese, the medical school in Fukushima and the government of Japan to set up a research center looking into tropical diseases, and every year you have quite a number of scientists, doctors, scholars from Japan working in Ghana, and some of our own scholars are coming out over here. Now, so, this is one of the ways in which, you know, if you can have more interaction, where if you can open your universities more fully, in spite of the language difficulty, which is one of the obvious barriers, it seems to me that Japan will build up much more direct knowledge and understanding in the critical areas beyond only trade and, you know, the political things which resolutions passed in the General Assembly. You know, Japan wants they to sponsor this resolution and so forth. It seems to me that apart from the emphasis on one of the most long-term connections will be in the area of science and technology and education. Because this is the area particularly in which Africa very much needs to expand its, you know, its range of contacts.
So you consider the development of human resources through education and exchange of knowledge is probably the most important key for the development.
Yes, in fact, you will see that most of the developing countries, including those in Africa, are interested in Japan because Japan is a country which, in fact, has been able to modernize. Now, people ask for the miracle of this, you know, development of success of a very particular kind. And my own conviction, after living here and reading about this, is that the Meiji Restoration was very important. But even more important was the 250 years of the, you know, Sakoku and the development that took place in a very controlled, politically independent way. Now, what is needed is probably a more vigorous second or third Meiji Restoration for Japan to broaden its connections with the outside world, particularly in the areas that we mentioned, but also in culture and, you know, and history. Because it's only when you understand the culture and, you know, culture and national, you know, inheritance, you know, and inheritance and heritage of various countries, that you can have better understanding on the basis of equality and dignity, you see.
Well, you just refer to culture and the need for cultural exchange between Africa, Ghana, and Japan. And I would like to ask you, what kind of culture really do you have to offer us?
Yes.
We are, of course, interested in your tribal culture, you know, the dances and rites and so forth.
Yes.
But what of substantial interest to us do you
yes,
really
let me in fact, answer you by saying that one of the things which really struck me very early on in my stay here was one day on the, I think it's Keri no Hi, the day of, you know, this festival, when on the busy street of Aoyamadore, I encountered a festival procession, you know, with the mikoshi and all the dancing in the middle of a modern metropolis. Now, culture is not necessarily only dancing and, religious ceremonies, but it is in fact the embodiment of people's aspirations, their history, their music, their art, their dance, their poetry. And there's a rich mine, gold mine, we might put it, to be, culled in Africa. And it seems to me that insofar as you would like to establish basic, human and political relations, you cannot divorce these from the, contribution, the individual contribution which any particular people can make to the human, dialogue. And the North-South relationship, and so East-West, don't mean anything unless they are mediated through the language of human, human understanding. And human understanding is nothing unless it is founded upon, both the philosophical and the ethical as well as the social and cultural dimensions of the people. So the development problem, in fact, resolves itself how you combine both culture and science and technology together.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kwapong. It was very interesting. I believe we learned a lot about Africa, not just economic aspect, but culture as well. It was indeed very interesting, and certainly enjoyed having you in this program today.
Thank you very much.